The chamber was silent. 900 alien species sat in their designated seats, arranged in a massive spiral that rose toward a ceiling of living starlight. The Galactic Council had ruled the known universe for 40,000 years. They had crushed rebellions, absorbed civilizations, and erased entire planets from existence. Nothing surprised them anymore, until today. Ambassador David Mercer stood alone in the center of the chamber, on a platform designed to make the accused feel small. The platform was transparent, hovering above a pit of absolute darkness that seemed to swallow light itself. Above him, tiers upon tiers of alien faces looked down with contempt, curiosity, or cold calculation. David was 54 years old. His hair was gray at the temples, and his earth-blue diplomatic uniform was wrinkled from the long journey. He had no guards, no delegation, no weapons. He was the first human to ever stand in this chamber, and every being present expected him to beg for his life. He did not beg. The High Magistrate of the Council unfolded from its throne at the chamber's highest point. Orvax the Eternal was a being of pure crystallized energy, ancient beyond measure, its form shifting between shapes that hurt the eyes to observe. When it spoke, every translation device in the chamber hummed with its words. Species designation: human, planet of origin, Sol 3. Known locally as Earth, you have been summoned to answer for your crimes against the galactic hegemony. David looked up at the towering entity without fear. I am here to listen. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The accused always trembled. They always wept. They always offered anything and everything to escape judgment. This human did none of these things. Orvax continued. 23 cycles ago, your species transmitted a signal into deep space. A message. The Council intercepted this message and determined it to be a threat to galactic stability. On the massive screens surrounding the chamber, the message played. It had been sent from Earth in 14,000 languages, broadcast on every frequency humans could generate. To any who receive this, we are humanity. We come from the third planet of a yellow star on the outer edge of the galaxy. We have detected your presence in our solar system. We have analyzed your observation devices. We understand that you are watching us. We ask, with respect, that you leave us in peace. We do not wish conflict, but we are prepared for it. This is our only warning. The chamber erupted in laughter. The Kethrani delegate, a creature of scales and ancient hatred, rose from its seat with a hissing sound. This is the message that entertained us so greatly when it arrived. A species that has barely left its own gravity well, threatening the hegemony. We found it amusing. More laughter filled the chamber. David remained motionless. In response to this message, Orvax said, the Council authorized a demonstration. The battleship Void Hammer was dispatched to Sol 3. Its mission was to destroy humanity's orbital infrastructure, eliminate their military capacity, and prepare the species for integration into the labor caste. The High Magistrate paused. The laughter died away. The Void Hammer carried 60,000 of our finest warriors. It was armed with weapons capable of shattering moons. It was the most powerful vessel deployed in 400 years. David spoke a single word. Was? The word echoed through the chamber. Ambassador Mercer, Orvax said, and something in its voice had changed. The translation devices struggled to process the new tone. Later analysis would identify it as fear. You will explain what happened to the Void Hammer. David looked around the chamber slowly, meeting the eyes and sensors and psychic receivers of 900 species. No, he said calmly. I do not think I will. Chaos erupted. Delegates screamed for his execution. Military representatives demanded that 100 ships be sent to Earth immediately. Economic advisors calculated the lost resources and wailed in frequencies that cracked translator devices. Throughout the chamber, David stood in perfect stillness through all of it. When order was finally restored, Orvax spoke again. "You will explain, human, or you will be found in contempt of this council." "I was sent here to deliver a message," David replied. "That is my only purpose. Then deliver it." David reached slowly into his uniform pocket. Hundreds of weapon systems locked onto him instantly. He withdrew a small crystal, ordinary in appearance, and held it up for all to see. 23 cycles ago, we sent a warning. You laughed at it. 18 cycles ago, your battleship entered our system. It never left. He turned the crystal slowly in his fingers. This contains the answer to your question. But my government instructed me to tell you something first. Speak. What happened to the Void Hammer was not an attack. It was defense. We did not want this conflict. We still do not want this conflict. We are offering one final time the chance for peace. The Kethrani delegate laughed again, though the sound was forced now. Peace? After you destroyed a vessel of the hegemony? There can be no peace. There will only be your extinction. David turned to face the Kethrani directly. His voice remained level, almost gentle. I was instructed to say something specifically to your species, Ambassador. What might that be? We know about the 12 breeding colonies you have hidden in the Voron Nebula. We know their exact locations. We know the population of each one. We know the names of your offspring who command them. David paused. We have known for 18 cycles. We have done nothing, because we are not aggressors. But understand this clearly, we could have. The Kethrani delegate did not laugh again. David turned back to Orvax and placed the crystal on the platform beneath his feet. Play this recording. Watch what happened to your warship. Watch carefully, and then decide whether you truly want to know what we did with the survivors. The chamber was absolutely silent. The crystal activated on its own, filling the vast space with light, and the Galactic Council watched. History changed forever. The recording began with a standard approach. The Void Hammer, magnificent and terrible, emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. Its sensors cataloged targets immediately: primitive satellites, fragile stations. A handful of exploration vessels scattered across the system. Commander Threll, a Vazari officer with 3 centuries of conquest behind him, stood on the bridge with confidence radiating from every scale on his body. Begin the demonstration, he ordered. Target their largest orbital station. Let them see it burn before we address their planet. The weapons officer complied. Targeting solutions locked onto what humans called Unity Station, a spinning ring of metal and glass that housed 400 people. Fire, the plasma cannon, capable of melting through solid rock, streaked toward its target, and then it stopped dot in the council chamber. Delegates leaned forward. On the recording, the Void Hammer's crew froze in confusion. Report, Thrall demanded. Unknown, Commander. The projectile has been halted. Halted by what? The answer came not from his crew, but from the communication system, which crackled with a voice speaking perfect Vasari. Commander Thrall, I am Admiral Helen Cross of Earth Defense Command. Please stand down your weapons and prepare for inspection. Thrall laughed. Inspection? By what ship? I detect nothing but primitive garbage in this system. That is correct. You detect nothing. The human voice was calm, almost pleasant. That does not mean nothing is here. In the council chamber, several delegates noticed something wrong with the recording. The stars behind the Void Hammer were incorrect. There were dark spots where light should exist. Something enormous was blocking the void itself. Thrall noticed too. What is that shadow? That, Admiral Cross replied, is the consequence of ignoring our message. The shadow moved, and the Galactic Council watched the impossible begin. The recording continued to play in the council chamber, and 900 species watched their understanding of the universe shatter. On the screens, the Void Hammer's sensors screamed warnings that made no sense. Mass readings that exceeded planetary scales. Energy signatures that burned hotter than stars. And something else, something the Vasari translation systems labeled as dimensional impossibility. Commander Threll's confidence was gone. All weapons, target the shadow. Fire everything. The Void Hammer unleashed its full arsenal. Planet-breaking missiles. Antimatter projectors. Gravitational shears that could tear holes in space itself. The firepower of a civilization that had conquered 8,000 worlds poured into the darkness. Nothing happened. The weapons are functioning, Commander. But the projectiles are not arriving at their destinations. Where are they going? They appear to be entering somewhere else. Admiral Cross's voice returned, still calm, still pleasant. Commander, we tried to warn you. Your weapons technology is based on principles we stopped using 2 centuries ago. They cannot hurt us. They never could. Threll's scales rippled with rage. Then we will destroy you with mass alone. Hell, all engines forward. Ram the largest shadow. Commander, that would be unwise. Do it now. The Void Hammer's engines ignited. The greatest warship in the hegemony's fleet, carrying 60,000 soldiers, accelerated toward the impossible darkness. It reached 1/10 of its maximum speed before it stopped. Not slowly. Not gradually. Instantly. Every molecule of the vessel frozen in place as if time itself had ended. What is happening? Threll screamed. You are being boarded, Admiral Cross said. Please remain calm. Resistance will cause discomfort. The recording showed the Void Hammer's hull beginning to glow. Not with heat, but with something else. Later analysis by Council. Scientists would identify it as controlled probability. Manipulation, though they had no idea what that meant. Doors that were sealed stood open. Walls that were solid became empty air, and through them walked humans. In the council chamber. Delegates made sounds of disbelief. On the recording, humans walked through the vacuum of space without protection. They wore simple uniforms, breathing nothing, walking through solid metal as if it were mist. Their faces showed no strain, no effort. They moved through the warship like ghosts. This is impossible, the Kethrani delegate whispered. On the recording, Threll said the same thing. A human woman approached him on the bridge. She was young, with dark hair and kind eyes that seemed genuinely apologetic. I am sorry, Commander. We really did try to warn you. What are you? She tilted her head, considering the question. We are what happens when you leave a species alone for 50,000 years. We had time to think. Time to grow. Time to become something new. The Council surveyed your world 200 cycles ago. You were primitives. You could barely reach your own moon. The woman smiled. Yes, that is what we wanted you to see. The recording ended. In the council chamber. Silence lasted for 23 seconds. Then Orvax the Eternal spoke. Ambassador Mercer. Where is the crew of the Void Hammer? David looked up at the High Magistrate, with the same calm he had displayed since arriving. Alive, unhurt, quite comfortable actually. They have been our guests for 18 cycles. You have held 60,000 citizens of the hegemony prisoner for 18 cycles? Not prisoners, guests. They were free to leave at any time. Most chose not to. Earth is very pleasant, and we have made improvements since your last visit. He paused. Also, many of your species have discovered they enjoy something we call chocolate. It has become quite popular. The chamber did not know how to respond. David continued. The Void Hammer itself has been moved. Intact. Functional. We made some upgrades. You will find it currently in orbit around your homeworld, High Magistrate. Orvax's crystalline form flickered. When? The entity demanded. 4 cycles ago. It has been there for 4 cycles. Your sensors have not detected it because we did not want them to. We are allowing detection now. Across the chamber, delegates began receiving frantic messages from their homeworlds. A ship, a massive ship, peering from nowhere, hovering in their skies, silent, waiting. We moved it to prove a point, David said. We could have hidden it forever. We could have used it against you. We chose not to, because we are not your enemies. We do not want to be your enemies. He stepped forward, and his voice carried to every corner of the vast chamber. But we are not your victims either. The session was suspended. Ambassador Mercer was escorted to secure quarters by guards who seemed more terrified of him than concerned about his escape. During the break, chaos spread across the hegemony. The Void Hammer appeared visible above 23 capital worlds simultaneously. Scientists tried to explain how a single ship could exist in multiple locations at once. A failed dot analysis teams studied the recording frame by frame. They focused on the humans walking through vacuum, passing through solid matter, manipulating reality like clay. The Academy of Sciences released a report that was immediately classified at the highest level. The humans had done the impossible. They had transcended normal physics entirely. When the session resumed, the chamber was different. The upper levels, usually empty to demonstrate superiority, were packed with observers. Species that had not attended council sessions in 1,000 years had sent representatives. Everyone wanted to see the humans. David stood in the same position, but now another figure stood beside him. A human man, elderly, with white hair and eyes that held depths that made psychically sensitive species deeply uncomfortable. I am Director Thomas Grant, the man announced, of Earth's Department of External Affairs. I am authorized to answer your questions. Orvax spoke first. How? How did your species advance so far beyond our projections? Thomas smiled gently. May I tell you a story, High Magistrate? You may. 52,000 years ago, the hegemony surveyed Earth. You found a promising species, intelligent, adaptable, beginning to use simple tools. You concluded that we would eventually develop space travel. So you planted observation devices, classified us for future harvesting, and moved on. You had time. We were millennia from being useful. He paused. But you made an error. What error? You assumed we would develop normally. You assumed we would follow the standard path. Mechanical technology, then digital, then energy manipulation, then biological enhancement, then transcendence. Every species in your records followed that path. Every species took between 10,000 and 100,000 years. That is the natural progression. Natural for you, not for us. Thomas's voice was soft but certain. Humans have a peculiar trait. We hate waiting. We find inefficiency offensive. When we encounter a problem, we do not accept the standard solution. We look for better ones. He gestured, and a display appeared showing Earth's history. 3,000 years ago, we discovered mathematics. Within 2 centuries, we used it to predict planetary motion. Within another century, we used it to question the nature of reality itself. Your species took 60,000 years to make that leap. We made it in 300. The display accelerated. 200 years ago, we split the atom. 100 years ago, we walked on our moon. 80 years ago, we found your observation devices. And that is when everything changed. The chamber fell absolutely silent. We became very motivated to understand what we were looking at. And we did. Thomas looked around at 900 species, and his next words would echo across the galaxy for centuries. We are not primitives, High Magistrate. We stopped being primitives 50 years ago. We just did not tell you. The chamber remained frozen in shock as Director Thomas Grant continued his explanation. Your observation devices were passive, designed to watch, not interact. But they contained something invaluable, proof that other physics existed. We did not know what we were seeing, but we knew it was beyond our current understanding. So we dedicated everything to understanding it. You reverse-engineered our technology? Orvax asked. No, your technology is based on principles we now consider primitive. We looked at your devices and asked a different question. What kind of universe allows this to exist? And then we started exploring that universe. The holographic display changed. It showed a human laboratory, and in the center, what appeared to be a controlled tier in reality itself. Council scientists throughout the chamber cried out in shock. 50 years ago, we achieved our first stable dimensional breach. We discovered that what you call physics is just one layer of a much larger reality. There are levels above and below that your species never imagined. We have been exploring them ever since. Orvax's form flickered with what the translation devices identified as distress. You have been a transcendent species for 50 years? Transcendent is not the word we prefer. We are still learning, still growing, still very young by cosmic standards. But yes, for 50 years we have been capable of doing things the hegemony cannot understand. Then why did you hide? Thomas's expression became sad. Because we know what the hegemony does to transcendent species. The chamber fell silent. Your records show 19 civilizations that achieved what we achieved. All 19 were destroyed before they could fully develop. You call it threat elimination. We call it murder. The Kethrani delegate rose with fury in its voice. Lies. Propaganda designed to turn the council against itself. Is it? Thomas gestured, and new images filled the chamber. We found your historical records. The ones you deleted. The ones you made it a capital offense to mention. But information has a way of surviving. The chamber filled with light, images appeared. Voices spoke in dead languages. And the council witnessed its own history, the parts it had deliberately forgotten. The Velanthi, a species of living sound that transcended 20,000 years ago. They offered the hegemony partnership and shared knowledge. The hegemony responded with a weapon that silenced their entire civilization, the crystalline. Beings of pure thought that achieved transcendence 15,000 years ago. They offered to teach freely. The hegemony responded with a virus that shattered their consciousness into scattered fragments. The Dreamwalkers, the Void Children, the Eternal Song, one by one, species that had reached the edge of godhood, and one by one, the hegemony had murdered them all. We found these records, Thomas said as the images faded, because we looked. We knew what to search for. Your observation devices contained enough data for us to reconstruct your history. All of it. He looked directly at the Kethrani delegate. Your species ambassador. The Kethrani. 4 million years ago, you achieved transcendence. You were the first. And then, terrified of competition, you systematically exterminated every species that followed. The hegemony is not a government. It is a cage designed to ensure that no one ever threatens Kethrani power again. The chamber exploded. The Kethrani screamed denials. Other species turned on them with accusations that had been whispered for millennia, but never proven. Alliances that had stood for 10,000 years shattered in seconds. The careful order of the hegemony, built across 40,000 years, began to collapse. Through it all, David and Thomas stood motionless. Ambassador Mercer leaned toward the director. That was the plan, was it not? Not just survival, freedom. We had 50 years to prepare, Thomas replied quietly. We studied the hegemony. We understood how it worked. And we understood that the only way to truly be safe was to destroy the system that threatened us by giving them truth. Truth is the most powerful weapon in the universe. The hegemony ruled through lies. Without those lies, it cannot stand. Above them, the chamber tore itself apart. Species that had been enslaved for millennia saw their chance at freedom. Species that had been partners in the hegemony's crimes scrambled to distance themselves. And the Kethrani, suddenly exposed, found themselves alone against a galaxy of enemies they had spent eons creating. The Kethrani ambassador screamed at David across the chaos. "You have destroyed us." David's voice was calm. "No, ambassador. You destroyed yourselves 4 million years ago when you chose fear over cooperation. We simply helped everyone else remember. Hours passed. Order was eventually restored, though the chamber was smaller now. Many delegations had left, recalled to their homeworlds to deal with the spreading crisis. The remaining representatives looked exhausted, shaken, uncertain. Orvax spoke from its throne, its voice weaker than before. "Ambassador Mercer, what do your people want?" David stepped forward. "The same thing we wanted 23 cycles ago. The same thing we have always wanted. To be left alone. To exist in peace. To grow and explore without threat. And in return? In return, we will not interfere with your civilizations. We have no interest in conquest. We have no desire to rule. We only want to live. What if we refuse?" Thomas answered that question. "If you refuse, we will defend ourselves. Not with aggression, not with attacks, but with absolute certainty. Any ship that enters our space with hostile intent will simply stop existing. Any weapon fired at our worlds will never arrive. Any army sent against us will find themselves back where they started with no memory of the journey. You would erase memories? Only hostile intentions. Only the desire to harm. The individuals would be unhurt, merely redirected. We do not want to kill. We find death distasteful. But we will not allow our species to be destroyed." The chamber was silent. Orvax spoke slowly. "You are offering mercy." "Yes, even after we tried to destroy you." "Yes, why?" David looked around the chamber, at species who had spent their existence conquering and consuming, and his answer was simple. "Because that is who we chose to be." The words hung in the air. For the first time in 40,000 years, the Galactic Council had nothing to say. Ambassador Mercer continued. "We could have remained hidden forever. We could have grown in secret until we were powerful enough to simply erase the hegemony from existence. We chose not to, because annihilation is easy. Peace is hard. We prefer the harder path." He gestured to the chaos still visible on the upper tiers, where the Kethrani delegation sat isolated and abandoned. "The hegemony is dying. You can feel it. The lies that held it together are gone. What rises from the ashes is your choice, not ours. But we offer this. Any species that wishes to build something new, something based on cooperation instead of conquest, will find humanity willing to help. And if we choose war instead?" David smiled, and for the first time there was something ancient and terrible behind his eyes. "Then you will discover that mercy was the kindest option we had." The session ended. The vote would come tomorrow. But everyone in that chamber knew the decision had already been made. The hegemony was finished, and humanity had won without firing a single shot. The vote was called 18 hours later, after debate that fractured alliances that had stood for millennia. The question was simple: accept humanity's terms and withdraw from soul space forever, or reject them and face consequences that no one truly wanted to imagine. The Kethrani ambassador led the opposition, standing before the chamber, scales shimmering. With barely controlled rage, Ambassador Vreth delivered a speech that would be studied in political academies for centuries. "Look at us," he hissed. "Look at what we have become. The hegemony has ruled this galaxy for 40,000 years. We have conquered 8,000 species. We have built an empire spanning 100 million stars. And now a single primitive world, a single species barely emerged from their caves, threatens us with extinction, and we consider surrender? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the upper tiers. Despite everything, some still clung to the old ways. The humans speak of mercy, of peace, of coexistence. But we know what they truly are: a threat to everything we have built. A species that has somehow, impossibly, surpassed us. And you know what the hegemony does to threats. He pointed at David Mercer, still standing calmly in the central pit. Every great power faces a moment of choice. A moment when a rising challenger must be crushed before it grows too strong. We have reached that moment. Yes, the humans have shown capabilities. But they have also shown weakness. What weakness? Someone called their mercy, their restraint, their pathetic attachment to life. Vreth's voice rose. They could have destroyed the Void Hammer. Instead, they captured it. They could have hidden forever. Instead, they sent an ambassador. They could have struck first. Instead, they offer negotiation. These are not the actions of a powerful species. These are the actions of a frightened one. David spoke calmly. We are not frightened, Ambassador. Then why offer terms at all? If you are truly invincible, why negotiate? Because killing is easy. Peace is hard. We chose the harder path. Vreth laughed. And that is exactly your weakness. In the hegemony, we understand the fundamental truth. The universe rewards cruelty. The gentle are devoured. The merciful are exploited. You speak of transcendence, but you have transcended nothing. You are still bound by primitive emotional limits that we abandoned long ago. He turned to the full chamber. I call for immediate military action. Every fleet in the hegemony concentrated on Sol space. Yes, the humans stopped one ship. But can they stop 10,000? 100,000? Can they redirect the hostile thoughts of 1 billion warriors? Can they edit the intentions of an entire galaxy? Yes, David said quietly. We can. The chamber froze. You doubt me. That is understandable. So let me demonstrate something else. He reached into his pocket and withdrew another small device. This is a gift from my government. A gesture of good faith that I was instructed to deliver only if you chose war. What is it? Horvax demanded. A cure. Silence. 47 species in this chamber are currently suffering from the Kethrani dependency plague, a genetic modification your masters introduced to your populations millennia ago, making you biologically incapable of surviving without Kethrani pharmaceutical support. It was how they maintained control, how they ensured loyalty. The chamber erupted in shock. Species turned to look at the Kethrani with new understanding, new horror. We decoded the plague 6 cycles ago. This device contains the cure. Free. For everyone. No conditions, no demands. David placed it on the platform. If you choose peace, we will share everything we know, every cure, every technology, every advancement, freely, because that is who we chose to be. He looked directly at Vreth. But if you choose war, you should know something else. We have also decoded the Kethrani biology. Completely. We understand every vulnerability, every weakness, every pressure point that 4 million years of evolution created. David's voice remained gentle, almost sad. We could end your species in an afternoon, Ambassador. We could rewrite your genetics until the Kethrani are nothing but a memory. We could do it from here, from this chamber, without anyone detecting the change until it was complete. Vreth's scales went pale. We will not, because that is not who we are. But understand this. Mercy is a choice. It can be withdrawn. And if you force our hand, if you leave us no alternative, we will defend ourselves with weapons you cannot imagine against threats you cannot comprehend. The chamber was absolutely silent. David continued. 23 cycles ago, we sent a message. A simple request. Leave us alone. You laughed. You sent a warship. You thought us prey. He looked around at 900 species. We are not prey. We never were. We simply chose to appear that way because we hoped, desperately hoped, that you would choose peace. He gestured to Vreth. The ambassador asks why we offer mercy. I will tell you why. Because we remember what it was like to be weak. We remember centuries of suffering, of war, of cruelty, inflicted on ourselves by ourselves. We remember nearly destroying our own species a dozen times before we learned better. His voice softened. We do not wish that suffering on anyone, not even on those who threatened us. We have transcended many things, but we have not transcended compassion. We have not transcended hope. We still believe that the universe can be better than it is. Ambassador Mercer looked up at Orvax the Eternal. High Magistrate, you have ruled this council for 12,000 years. You have seen empires rise and fall. You have watched species destroy themselves and others. You have witnessed the worst that intelligent life can do. I have, Orvax said. Admitted. Then you know that this moment matters. The decision made today will echo across the galaxy for millennia. You can choose war and face a species that will defend itself without mercy. Or you can choose peace and face a future where transcendence is not punished but celebrated, where species help each other grow instead of tearing each other down, where the universe becomes something more than an endless cycle of conquest and destruction. David spread his hands. We cannot make this choice for you. We can only offer it. Peace, partnership, a new beginning. Or war and consequences that none of us want to face. He stepped back. The decision is yours. The vote began. Species after species declared their position. The old powers, those closest to the Kethrani, voted for war. But they were few. The others, the enslaved, the controlled, the fearful, voted for peace. They voted for freedom. They voted for hope. When it was done, the count stood at 712 for peace, 188 for war. The hegemony was finished, and in its place, something new was about to be born. Orvax the Eternal rose from its throne for the final time. The council has decided. The hegemony is dissolved. All treaties are void. All obligations are ended. Each species is free to determine its own future. The entity turned to David. Ambassador Mercer. Humanity has requested peace. Humanity has been granted peace. What happens now? David smiled. Now, High Magistrate, we build something better. 6 months had passed since the hegemony fell. The Grand Council chamber was quiet now. Where 900 species once gathered, barely 300 remained. The old empire had fragmented into dozens of competing factions. Civil wars raged across 1,000 worlds as species finally settled ancient grudges. The Kethrani had retreated to their core systems, their power reduced to a shadow of its former glory. But here, in this chamber, something new was growing. Ambassador David Mercer stood on the same platform where he had faced judgment 6 months ago. But now he stood as something different. Not an accused, but an architect. Orvax the Eternal was gone. Its position had been abolished. In its place stood a simple podium, and behind that podium, representatives of the newly formed Galactic Cooperative. A governing body built not on conquest, but on voluntary association. The delegate from Sol 3 has the floor, announced the session moderator. A being named Threll from a species enslaved for 3,000 years until the hegemony's collapse. It was strange, David thought, how quickly former enemies could become partners when the chains were removed. He stepped forward. I come before you today not as a conqueror, not as a judge, but as a neighbor. 6 months ago, Humanity offered the galaxy a choice: peace or conflict. The galaxy chose conflict among yourselves. That was not our intention, but perhaps it was necessary. Perhaps the old order had to burn before a new one could rise. He paused, looking around the diminished but hopeful chamber. Humanity's position has not changed. We do not seek territory. We do not seek resources. We do not seek subjects. We seek only what we have always sought: the right to exist, to grow, to explore this magnificent universe alongside other curious minds. From the upper tiers, a delegate from the Velanthi remnant rose. The species, thought extinct, had somehow reconstituted itself in the chaos of the hegemony's fall. The cure David had provided had freed them from biological bondage, and ancient backup consciousness systems had allowed their return. We have a question for the human delegate. Ask. You possess technology that could make you masters of this galaxy. You could reshape reality itself. Why do you not use it? David smiled. May I tell you a story? Please. 200 years ago, my species invented weapons capable of destroying our entire civilization. We came very close to using them. Several times. And in that fire, facing our own extinction, we learned something important. Power is not the measure of a species. Wisdom is. Compassion is. The choice of what not to do matters far more than the choice of what to do. He gestured to the chamber around him. You ask why we do not conquer. The answer is simple. We have been conquered. By our own worst impulses. By our own capacity for destruction. We barely survived that conquest. And in surviving, we learned that the universe is not a competition to be won. It is a garden to be tended, a mystery to be explored, a conversation to be continued. The Velanthi delegate lowered itself in what appeared to be a bow. Then perhaps, human ambassador, we are not so different after all. No, David agreed. We are not. From the moderator's podium, Threll spoke. The Galactic Cooperative calls for a vote. The question before us: should humanity be invited to join as a founding member? The vote was unanimous. As the session ended, Director Thomas Grant approached David. He looked older than he had 6 months ago, tired from endless negotiations and the weight of rebuilding a galaxy. We did it, he said quietly. We actually did it. We did the easy part, David replied. The hard part comes now. Building trust. Healing wounds. Teaching 300 species that cooperation is more powerful than conquest. That will take centuries. Are we ready for that? David looked up at the stars visible through the chamber's crystalline dome. Somewhere out there, Earth spun quietly around its yellow sun. 8 billion humans were only beginning to understand what their species had become. We have to be. We chose this path. We chose to be gentle when we could have been terrible. We chose to build when we could have destroyed. Now we must live with that choice. Any regrets? David was silent for a long moment. One, I wish we could have saved them. The Kethrani. All of them. Every species the hegemony destroyed. The Velanthi who died 20,000 years ago. The crystalline shattered 15,000 years before that. The Dreamwalkers and the Void Children and all the others. They deserved to see this day. They deserved to know that their deaths mattered. Thomas placed a hand on his shoulder. Maybe they do know. Maybe, somewhere in the fabric of reality, some part of them survives. You said yourself that we are still learning. Perhaps someday we will find them. David smiled sadly. You sound like an optimist, Director. I learned it from the best. From a species that faced extinction and chose hope. From a species that was told to be afraid and chose courage instead. From a species that could have ruled through fear and chose to lead through example. He gestured to the chamber, to representatives of 300 species who had chosen to build something new together. Humanity's last message to the hegemony was ignored, but our first message to the cooperative will be heard, and I believe will echo for a very long time. David watched the assembled delegates, beings of light and crystal and thought and matter, all of them looking to humanity not as conquerors, but as partners. "Then let us make sure it is worth remembering," he said. Together, they walked out of the chamber and into the future they had chosen to build. Later that night, David stood alone on an observation deck, watching the stars. A young aide found him there, a woman named Rachel, who had been assigned to his delegation 3 months ago. "Ambassador, the Valanthi delegation is asking to meet with you." "What do they want?" "They want to share something. They say it is a gift." Rachel paused. "They say it is something their species preserved from before the silence. Something they want humanity to have." David turned from the stars. "What kind of gift?" "They call it the memory of light, a recording of every transcendent species the hegemony destroyed. Their thoughts, their dreams, their final moments." Rachel's voice was soft. "They say humanity is the first species in 4 million years, worthy of carrying it." David closed his eyes. The weight of that gift, of that responsibility, settled on his shoulders like a physical thing. "Tell them I would be honored." Rachel nodded and left. David turned back to the stars. Somewhere out there, 19 species had been erased from existence because they dared to grow. Their light had been extinguished because the Kethrani feared competition more than they valued life. But light has a way of persisting. Even in the darkest void, photons continue their journey forever. And perhaps, David thought, memories worked the same way. Perhaps the dead were never truly gone as long as someone remembered them. Humanity had been given a gift. The memories of the fallen, the dreams of the destroyed, the hopes of species that had reached for transcendence and been struck down for their ambition. It was a heavy burden, but it was also a sacred trust. David looked up at the infinite stars and made a silent promise. "We will remember you. We will carry your light forward. And someday, somehow, we will find a way to bring you home." The galaxy had changed. The hegemony was gone. And in its place, something new was being born. Something built on hope instead of fear, on cooperation instead of conquest, on the radical notion that species could grow together instead of tearing each other apart. Humanity's last message had been ignored. But their first message to the new galaxy would never be forgotten. And in the end, that was enough.